And now, ladies and gentlemen, we move the conversation onto this, and you can see there, if you zoom in, that is the famous day that the Abraham Accords was signed on the White House lawn between the then President Donald Trump, Morocco, the UAE, Bahrain, and even Sudan signed the Abraham Accords, which is a peace deal and real peace between the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and Israel. And let's just say October the 7th has been a bit of a setback to its progress, but it's still intact, and the Israeli-Arab conflict is still very much a peaceable one and on the table, believe it or not, even with countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel. And so this report, coming from the Henry Jackson Society, written by my next guest, Barak, is the unfreezing of the Abraham Accords, a new transatlantic strategy for greater peace, stability and integration in the Middle East. Barak, a warm welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning.
It's very nice to have you in on the show. You were part of my How to Make Peace in the Middle East success story. We nearly got there, but the show is only 3 hours. I think if we'd have had 6 hours, we might have been talking peace by now. So the contention of the report is that there really is a chance of a stable New Europe, I think, as Lo'ay al-Sharif, peace advocates, said about peace between the UAE and Israel. There's a real opportunity to create peace beyond this terrible war between Israel and Hamas.
If you were to sort of zoom out of the local Israeli-Gaza conflict, what you would see is the fact that the region requires it. It's in the region's interests to do it from a geopolitical perspective. The UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, they all want both a security and economic architecture in the region where, as a result of this architecture, they become more interconnected. They're able to deter Iran. This is why Iran unleashed its proxies to launch October the 7th, because Iran, quite rightfully so, feels alienated in the region, and it would do anything to scuttle the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords is a form of Vietnamization, i.e., America wants to maintain a very light footprint in the region. It really wants to pivot towards Asia and focus on US-China great power politics. There's a great line in The Godfather Part 3, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. And that's the story of America in the Middle East. It doesn't want to be there. It doesn't require the energy, right? It's now an energy producer. However, because of the potential proliferation of nuclear materials, the export of terrorism globally, it finds itself sucked back in there each time. So why they created the Abraham Accords was to be able to have local actors with formidable military capabilities and economic capabilities anchor and secure American interests in the region.
Right.
That was the rationale behind it, and it suited the interests of all the local actors that became signatories for this. This is why Saudi Arabia already is keen to normalise. It just has to press the pause button because it sees the sentiment of the local Arab street.
Right, so it's a top-down society, so all the kind of elites are sold in, but the guys on the streets are saying, well, what's in it for me? And as you say, like the mafia, for example, you know, they let me out and they pull me back in, and both China and Iran, as you say in the report, are seeking to oust the US from the Middle East by undermining the Abraham Accords that anchor the US's strategic interests. And the UK, let's talk about us here, because our military operates closely alongside the US in striking the Houthi assets, maintains significant security presence and economic interests in the Gulf. The UK, along with other Western states, you report, can assist US efforts to deter Iran and prevent the Gulf states from gravitating towards China's sphere of influence. Is that the reason why what looks like the special relationship actually has a real reasoning, that Britain's first with the US to defend us against, Houthi terrorism.
We see that British forces are working closely alongside American forces to strike Houthi assets in the region. The problem that Britain faces is it doesn't have a coherent strategy towards the region. So if you look at both the 2021 and the 2023 integrated reviews, they identify the Gulf as key to British strategic interests. However, it kind of decouples its trade interests with its security interests. It doesn't actually say how Britain is going to contribute to shoring up security in the region. So what happens is you find that Britain is adopting a very reactive posture to strikes that are taking place in the region, to Houthi threats, but it doesn't preemptively and strategically carve out for itself what its role is going to be. And it's a shame because Britain has significant military assets in the region. It does joint exercises with the United States. It does joint exercises with Gulf allies.
Yeah.
And also Britain has to increase its military expenditure because its naval capacities are dwindling.
Yes.
So in order to project power effectively in the Gulf and to have interoperability with the US, it needs to be spending at least 2.5% of its GDP on the military.
Right, yes, because it was 2%, but now it's crept up. Of course, we are facing existential threats from enemies, for example, Russia, Iran, and China. And you mentioned, Barak, just before, about Iranian proxies being activated to scupper the Abraham Accords and indeed American influence in the region. And this story appears in the Mail this morning. The UK spying network tells MPs that the terror threat is at its highest level since 9/11. Can I ask you, Barak, that if the Iranian proxies are active in the Middle East, are they active here in the UK as well?
We've seen that they've been active in the UK before. Just last year, there was an IRGC network that posed a terrorist threat that was foiled. They've conducted terrorist attacks in places like Bulgaria before. So there's no such thing that if Iran is attempting to escalate conflict, it's not attempting to localize it. It wants to expand it both regionally and internationally. So let's not only focus on the Houthis in Yemen or Hamas in Gaza or Hezbollah in Lebanon. You have to focus internationally. So you're looking at threats emanating from South America, but also in the UK itself.
The terrible tragedy of the Ariana Grande concert, which was a terrible assault on young girls, basically, mainly, wasn't it? And young boys just enjoying a night out in Manchester at a nice concert, which shouldn't be forgotten for what it was enacted by a local Libyan. Was that not a lone wolf as such, because there's kind of no such thing, but was that connected to the Iranian regime?
I think that we have to be really careful in terms of differentiating between centrally guided terrorism, centrally sponsored, state-sponsored terrorism, and lone wolf actors.
And that's what he was.
You see, he was a lone wolf actor. However, there's a symbiotic relationship between them because they put out propaganda, they put out material.
Yes, it's not exactly lone wolf because he's connected via terrorism, isn't he, by support.
It appeals to alienated individuals around the world, but it also fosters alienation. So what we have is a certain dynamic where we need to contend with state-sponsored terrorism, but also sub-state terrorism, whether it be directly sponsored by a state or individuals. So it's metastasizing and it's preventing its overwhelming intelligence services because
Of course.
it needs to contend with multiple angles simultaneously.
And indeed, it was one of what Rishi Sunak's main points in his speech on Friday about the PREVENT programme, which I presume, Barak, is the main point of prevention, literally, to stop lone wolves like this person.
I think that in order to really create an effective PREVENT programme, one needs to create a national form of Islam, one that Muslim, in a sense, enabling Muslims to detach from radical preachers sent from states that don't share our values, so to create a UK form of Islam, but also to create a strong institutional nationalism that people from multiple backgrounds can integrate into, and that's something that the UK currently lacks. Every counter-terrorism...
That is a massive ask, Barak.
No, but
I think it's a huge ask what you're saying.
But the UK currently, every counter-terrorism or counter-radicalisation strategy is attempting to address something in a very symptomatic manner. And the reason why why these symptoms constantly emerge is because we lack a coherent rational identity.
Right.
And a rational identity could be fostered by, our origins of the Magna Carta or institutional. The difference between, for example, America and the UK is that in the UK, somebody would say, I'm Chinese or I'm Pakistani. In America, they would say, I'm American of Chinese descent.
Yeah, I'm a Chinese American. But you can say that here. We have that structure here because you can say I'm Pakistani British. You can't say you're Pakistani English because being English is something historic. But being British, it's a political entity, a bit like being an American. I'm Scottish and British, I'm Welsh and British, I'm Northern Irish and British. You can do that. I know indeed my own grandma, who was from Vienna in Austria with a thick Viennese brogue, she said, I am very proud to be British, and she meant it, and it was true. It was true. And we can do that from the word go. It is a kind of like an Americanism, isn't it?
So I would say even if the institutions exist, you still need greater rational meaning behind it for people to identify towards.
And very quickly, Barak, what is that? What is that rationale? How do we get there?
Our freedoms that are entrenched in the Magna Carta are rational. It transcends history.
Yes.
It's a value system.
It's values, isn't it? Barak Sina, thank you very much. He has written this report, Unfreezing the Abraham Accords, from the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you very much indeed.